Hi, everyone. It's Dr. Moyad here for our special Men's Health / Father's Day broadcast with the PCRI. And I'm so glad that you could join us because we have a special guest. And this person is a well-known, I would call him sports analyst, sports broadcaster. He's going to talk a little bit about himself in a second. His name is Vic Lombardi. And he's joined us here from Denver. And he actually works, now you have to walk me through this, Vic, because you've done broadcasting for a long time, but can you take us through your current situation besides your well-known podcast and the things that you do for Denver sports and the Denver Nuggets?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, first of all, Doctor. I am they classify me as a host now. So I'm a sports host. I host a pre and post game shows for all the Denver Nuggets telecasts. I also do a sports talk radio show here in town for Altitude Sports Radio on a daily basis. I do that every morning. I was a longtime local news television sports guy, so I'm the guy who showed up and gave you the highlights of all the games. I did that for 20 years, and I got into the hosting thing about 4 or 5 years ago, just to sort of change of pace. So still involved in the sports world, still doing it in many different forms, whether it's television, radio, digital. That's what I do. I take a big bite out of the apple or a big bite out of the sports apple every single day.
So you still take calls from fans every day?
Oh yeah. And some of them are crazy and some of them are great. So there's a lot of exchange of dialogue.
Basically, you're a therapist.
Well, I like to tell them they're providing therapy for me, but it right now. I don't know if it's therapy or if I can't decide whether it's killing me or helping me at this point, to be honest with you, because we're in some crazy times and sports is necessary more than ever right now. So we're all anxious for sports to get going again.
Yeah, well, I had one question that regardless if this went on for 30 minutes or 3 hours, or 3 minutes, it was most important to me. Are you ready for this question?
Fire away.
You're not really a Notre Dame fan, are you?
Well, I better be, because a lot of my parents' hard-earned money went to Notre Dame, and I graduated from Notre Dame. So, I better be a Notre Dame fan. Let's see, is there anything behind me that's Notre Dame related? Oh yeah, there's plenty of Notre Dame in my house here. So. Yeah, there's a little sign in the corner of my room that says "Talk like a champion" rather than "Play like a champion." Why, are you an SC guy or something?
I worked at Michigan for 25 years, and I grew up in Ann Arbor. So you know how crazy it is, right? I apologize. I even had my Notre Dame friends here last year. They traveled from all parts of the country, and we went to the big rainout. So I love the rivalry. It's been amazing. In fact, in your honor, my friends, I never wear it. My friends gave me a Notre Dame Snuggie about 5 years ago, and I bring it out for occasions like this, but otherwise I put it in the closet.
It's funny. I have one just like that. So, and I wear mine openly. So, yeah, it's a passionate rivalry, and I'm glad it exists. Man, doesn't this time beg for that rivalry right now to take our minds off a lot of things, just to have a game right now? Let's go.
I beg for it. So let me talk a little sports, and we'll talk a little prostate cancer and a little sports and back and forth. Am I going to get to go to a football game anytime soon? What do you think?
I think it depends where you live. If you live in the SEC country, I don't think anyone's going to tell those people not to go to a football game. Good luck with that. So if you live in certain parts of the country where the restrictions are a little higher and people are taking it more seriously, I don't know. I think it depends on the regions in which you live. They're having golf tournaments. I watched a golf tournament over the weekend, and nobody's there. No galleries are allowed, no fans. But that's a sport that can survive without fans. Yeah. I don't know how you play football without fans in the stands. It would seem so empty and hollow and just a void that needs to be filled. I don't know how that works, especially college football, where home field advantage is everything. So I'm not certain how that's going to work. Empty stands with football going on the field is going to feel really weird.
And how about the Denver Nuggets? Do you think they're going to play? Is it all set? They're going to play in Orlando, or what's the latest with all of this in the NBA?
That is the hope. That's the plan. Now, whether or not that plan gets executed, when we continue to hear about the numbers spiking in different regions of the country, nothing is out of the question. But I think that's going to happen. I think basketball will return late July. August is when they'll start with the finish of the regular season, 8 games, and then they'll go on to the NBA playoffs. So I think that's fine. I think it's going to see again. The NBA is doing something that we've never seen before. Home court advantage certainly doesn't exist. How do you have a playoff series where you go back and forth and, the aura of playing in a certain arena, that stuff is gone. Now everyone's on a neutral court. There is no home court advantage. There is no opposing fan base that is catcalling and doing things to distract you during the course of a game. Every game is neutral. So I can't wait to see how they figure this out.
Yeah, I just can't wait to watch something. Like I said, I watched a little bit of golf, and I'm not a big golf fan, but I was just excited to see something on. But the other thing, when I read a little bit about your bio, I thought it was fascinating that your interaction with sports, and if you could tell everyone that story, your interaction with sports is what made you essentially go in to get tested for prostate cancer. Can you walk us through that story? Because it's unlike I've heard in a while.
I do a sports talk show every day, and we were interviewing a former hockey player, and during that interview, he's a cancer survivor himself. He had colon cancer, and he impressed upon us how important it is to get tested, and said, it came on me suddenly without any symptoms, and next thing you know, I have colon cancer. And after that interview was done, I sort of sat there and I said, what am I doing? It sort of scared me into going to get a physical, albeit I get a physical every year, but it had been like 14 months when I looked at my calendar. It had been time overdue to go get a physical. So this was December of 2018. And I go in and I go in to get my normal physical, and my doctor had retired. I knew he was retiring, but he was gone at the time. So the new doctor, she says, I don't know you too well. You're 49 years of age. As long as you're here, why don't we go ahead and administer a PSA test and everything? And I go, yeah, whatever that is. Fine. For those of us in local media or any media, PSA is a public service announcement.
That's
so
right.
At the time when she said to me a PSA test, I go, you want me to do a public service announcement for the what do you want me to do here? So that's how dumb I was. That's how I was not conditioned at all for anything. I had never gotten any of these tests before. So she did the PSA test. And a week later, I get a call that says, hey, you need to go to the urologist. We see some really abnormal numbers here. And next thing you know, a few weeks later, I'm diagnosed with cancer. So that's what brought me to the doctor's office. What brought me there was a sports interview of a person who overcame cancer, who basically said, go get screened for something. And I did.
Wow. But that person was younger than you, right? But they were affected by cancer.
Yeah, and many people are. That's the thing about, prostate cancer and many of these other cancers. It's hard to put an age on a lot of them. And I can't stand the fact that prostate cancer carries this label that it's an old man's disease. That's what's scary about it, because trust me, I don't consider myself an old man. I may look at it at times, but I don't feel it. I don't act it. And when it carries a label like that, you never even think twice about it. So, and that's where our screenings and our process and the way we handle it in this country, I think we need a lot of work there, because I can't even imagine how many younger guys in their 40s, in their early 50s are walking around with no knowledge whatsoever and no symptoms whatsoever. Remember, I had no symptoms, none. Yeah. There was no reason, no cause for me to go in and get tested. And that's what I'm trying to shout that from the mountaintops today.
Did they tell you that you might have been fortunate also, because PSA is still a controversial test in some circles, right? But in some circles, and other people are black and white about it. Some circles it's controversial, but depending who offers it in a primary care setting comes up to that individual doctor. And were you aware going in when they brought up PSA that had you gone to potentially another doctor in the city or in a different climate, that they may have never even offered you that test.
No, not until after I've done all this research that I know it was a controversial subject. I thought it was just sort of matter of fact. I thought you just do it. But it's important to distinguish, too. Not only did I get the PSA, but after going to the urologist, the digital exam followed the PSA. And even upon the digital exam, I'll never forget it. It was all things clear. It was like, oh, feels fine. Everything's good here. This must be just a weird result. I will let you know. So then I got a second PSA just to double check while at the urologist. And the second PSA came back even higher. And then they said, well, you know what? There's something that's not working here. The digital exam did not show us anything. The PSA is showing us something. Let's go ahead and conduct a biopsy. And the biopsy, obviously, the proof was in the pudding right there. But it's, there are a lot of hurdles that you have to clear sometimes. Right. Even though PSAs are not foolproof, I did it. And even though digital exams are not foolproof, I did it. And upon further review, I would have done it all over again. It didn't, that kind of time and relative pain that I went through, that was no big deal. For the overall knowledge that I was carrying cancer, heck yeah. I mean, that I don't understand why this stuff is so controversial for false positives. If it costs you a few false positives, big deal. I'd rather have that than not get tested at all. If I don't get tested, I'm walking around right now with cancer that's very aggressive. I mean, that's dire, very dire.
Yeah. I mean, you were a very young man. I mean, that's what I'm saying. It was sort of it's an incredible set of circumstances. First, you're talking to someone younger as an athlete.
Yes.
And that sparks you to go in. Then you happen to get a doctor who believes in it in the primary care setting, which is you get through that hurdle, which is good. And then they find this, and thank goodness all this worked out in your favor, right?
No doubt.
And your family's favor. So now tell the audience what they found.
Okay. Yeah. A lot of the planets had to align there, mind you, because I'm feel stupid saying this. I didn't even know where the prostate was located. I had no idea what prostate cancer was. Now, I'd heard of it. Heck, 10 years earlier, I emceed a big gathering in the battle against prostate cancer. And I still wasn't, yeah. What is it again? Okay. I didn't know what it was. I just thought, some organ in there that has cancer. So when I got the biopsy back and I was told on the phone by the doctor, the urologist here locally, that I had cancer and that it's the words he used, it's a real, I think he said it's a little booger. It's a booger. You got to get in here. It's, I was like, well, what does that mean? So I go in and he discusses it with me. And then we get into Gleason scores and we get into the aggressive nature of it and how, he recommends really aggressive tactics. And I'm like, okay, well, this is a serious deal. So one thing led to another, and I was diagnosed at the time. The biopsy revealed a Gleason 8. And so I did all my due diligence and all my homework. And, I was told my options, either I could do a trial or an immediate radiation and the therapy, or I could go straight to surgery. And I was of the belief, hey, man, I got cancer. I want surgery. I want this thing out of here. So I did my homework. I talked to several people. I was given a recommendation to go to what I consider the top urology area here in Colorado. I went to another doctor, and I was put right in queue to go get the surgery done. And so I had the surgery done, 4 weeks removed from that biopsy. Pretty quick, very quick. So, and then after surgery, the pathology, the report came out, and he was even more aggressive than it was initially diagnosed. I was a Gleason 9 upon pathology. So, all these things fall into place, and you start to wonder, wow. I mean, that was a 2-month period where my life went from, I don't even know what a prostate is, to I'm an authority, I feel like, on prostate cancer.
Did they tell you after biopsy and then again after surgery, look, you're in a very select pool here of aggressiveness. These are the kind of aggressive tumors that end life early for some men. Did they were they candid with you about that?
Yes and no. They weren't like that. If I were told it that way, I would be like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Yeah. It was more of a, hey, this is a pretty aggressive cancer that we need to do something about now, rather than later. There's no wait and see with this.
Yeah.
So, and they had mentioned I was relatively young for this kind of cancer. They've had other cases younger, but I was 49 years old at the time. I'm 51 right now. So at the age of 49, to have this kind of cancer brewing inside of me, yeah, they impressed upon me we got to get on this. There's no messing around.
You,
Then it was
you're,
my choice. Did I want to go robotic surgery? Did I want to do something else? And I went straight to surgery.
you're very young for this kind of aggressive disease. But I think
Yeah.
what you highlight is every cancer, for the most part, breast cancer, prostate cancer, thyroid, you name all these cancers where people get screened. It's always a tale of two cities. And you got to talk about both cities, including your city. One city is sometimes we do overdiagnose. Sometimes people do overdiagnose disease or cancers that aren't that aggressive. But they also underdiagnose cancers that can be killers by not even screening somebody.
Sure.
So this is the tale of two cities that sometimes media-wise you have this dominant story, well, that more men are likely to die with prostate cancer than from it. But then it doesn't tell the opposite story, that there are a ton of people. The reason it's such a killer, there are a ton of people who never get a chance to get diagnosed with an aggressive tumor because they're never screened.
And again, I would rather err on the side of caution there. That's just
Yeah,
me. I know there are some men that are like, yeah, whatever. I would rather be told, yeah, you have cancer when I don't, rather than the opposite. Because if I don't go through that process, if I just wait this out, then and there was reason for me to wait. When you don't have symptoms too, a lot of these cancers cause issues that you can, hey, there's something wrong with my body. When I tell you, doctor, there was nothing wrong, I felt not. I mean, I was exercising daily. I had no fatigue issues. I had no urinary issues. I had no sex issues, nothing. Everything was fine. So the symptoms weren't shown. The symptoms were not there yet. And if the symptoms had arrived, if all of a sudden I had a byproduct, it could have been too late.
that's right. And that's the other thing that I didn't know the particulars about your situation. That's the other thing that's I'm so thankful in your situation and so scary, because when I see pictures of you or I see videos of you and I see you right now, you look like a healthy guy. You look like either you're lucky genetically or you actually take care of yourself.
Hmm.
So can you walk me through that? So if you talked about exercising regularly, like you're an exercise fan. Can you walk me through that? And it's another reason why, thank goodness, you were screened, and I'll explain that in a second.
No problem. Yeah, I'm an exercise fanatic, to be honest with you. I exercise 6 days a week, and on that seventh day, I'm miserable. I tell people there it's my therapy. It's sort of like it's sad, to be honest with you, because the day I don't exercise, I feel like something's missing. I feel almost guilty, and I'm trying to change that because I know the body needs rest, right? I know that, but before I was diagnosed, I exercised just as much as I do now. Now I'm a little more scheduled with it. I understand what I'm doing. Before I just did it. I would bike, I would run, I would lift weights, I would play basketball. Every day had some activity in it. The one thing I did not do pre-diagnosis is my diet was a mess. And when I say a mess, I ate anything I wanted. And that comes back to genetically. I don't know why, but it never impacted me. I've been the same weight since I was the same weight since college. I was always at about 175 pounds, and I would eat 3 rounds of Taco Bell. I would eat at my mother's every day. She the best Italian cooking in North Denver. And I would eat cheese. I would eat spaghetti. I would eat pizza. I'd never say no. I would eat it all up. You're as an immigrant, you learned to eat until the bowl is empty. It didn't matter. So my diet, I never paid attention to that stuff. And I always mocked people, to be honest. It was sad. I like, what are you talking about? You can't have that. Just eat it. It's fine. It's food. And then when all this happened and I did my education, I did my due process, and I read about my diet changed. It went 180. I don't do red meat. I've severely limited my sugars. Don't do breads. Don't do spaghettis. Don't do any of those Italian foods that my mother loves to feed me. I'm a big fish guy now, where before I never ate fish. I'm all about, as many vegetables as possible. Every day I go crazy with vegetables of all kinds. So my diet, and then as soon as I changed that diet, as soon as I lost 10 pounds, and I'm now 166 pounds every day, no matter what I eat in this type of diet, where before I was 176. So I was carrying 10 pounds of a bad diet essentially for all those years, without any knowledge that I was carrying a bad. I never really focused on that aspect of exercise. When people talk about exercise, I think you have to add the element of diet. It's exercise and diet, and they're both interchangeable. They both work together, and you cannot have one without the other. You have to make sure both are in tune.
Yeah, it's like the perfect marriage. You got to have both, right? And I think what you highlighted is the fact that we try to tell people all the time, whether it's PCRI conference or other places, that we have to get to the point where people realize that abs are not just made with exercise, but they're also made in the kitchen.
No doubt.
So you reflect that. But the reason I focus on the fact that you look healthy, you look like you take care of yourself, and you exercise, is that also has plenty of data to suggest it might reduce the risk of aggressive prostate cancer or dying from prostate cancer. So where I'm trying to get at, and I don't know if they talked to you about this, is that thank goodness that you were such an exercise fanatic, because you could argue that maybe you were getting something there that kept this thing slightly in check through your exercise, that had you not taken care of your body, this could have resulted in a different outcome based on what we know research-wise. You see what I mean?
No doubt. And, there's a little more of a backstory too, because I agree with the exercise thing. And trust me, I use it as fuel today when I do feel sloppy or fatigued and I don't want to do something. It's fuel for me to the motivation exercise. But let me give you the backstory. And I'm not sure if you're aware of this. So months before my diagnosis, I visited this clinic. Great people. They did great work. I mean, I got a lot of help in different areas, chiropractic help, stretching, things like that. Well, one day I'm there and I was asked, hey, are you interested in testosterone? A lot of low T centers out there. And I said, well, I don't know. Why would I need that? And they said, well, do you ever feel fatigued? Do you need more energy in the gym? I'm like, yeah, I'll take some of that. Bring it to me. Well, what do I do? And they go, well, we'll test you and see if you need some. I got my test back and they said, yeah, you're not exactly low T, but you're on the lower level. We can always boost your testosterone. So I willingly accepted that. And they did one of those pellets that they placed in my rear end, which was a painful process, by the way. And this would give me 3 months of a testosterone boost. Now, this was, mind you, about 5 months before I was diagnosed with cancer that I went through this. This was in the summer of 2018. So as I look back on that, I'm saying to myself, okay, how are we allowing this to happen? How can I go to an independent clinic, get a testosterone injection with no knowledge that I have prostate cancer, when the medical world understands that the worst thing you can do is fan the flames with testosterone? That is amazing to me. That no one's really at fault, but the system is so broken that how many other guys are doing what I did?
Oh man, did I love that segment. I mean, I appreciate how candid you were about that experience, because a lot of people would not be. It seems there's no question that some men benefit from testosterone, but there's also no question that a lot of people are handing it out like candy.
Yes.
And
handing it out with like candy, and I'm not saying selling you, but inducing you for reasons to take it. If I'm an active guy, I didn't need it, but it'll help you become less fatigued and be more energetic in the weight room or in the gym. Okay, let's do it. Will it hurt me? Nobody told me about, well, it's also fueling your prostate cancer that you don't know you have.
Yeah. That's absolutely fascinating. There's it's $1 billion market out there.
Mm-hmm.
And from over the counters to prescriptions, there are a lot of people that want a piece of the action.
Yeah.
And with that action, all these players comes detriment. And I haven't quite had anybody admit anytime recently that their experience wasn't optimal in that situation. So I appreciate, because it's true, a number, you probably remember the questions they were asking you. If you look at some of the questionnaires about low testosterone, they're essentially of me as a mid 50-year-old guy. Hey, did you wake up angry one day? Are you a little bit fatigued? Everybody experiences almost everything on that questionnaire when they wake up.
Every day, no doubt.
Every
I
day.
remember going through that chart. Do you want more energy while working out? Yeah. Do you want a better sex life? Sure. Who doesn't? You're answering questions that anyone can answer and would answer, and it's sort of leading you down that path. And again, I'm not trying to speak ill of these people that run these places, but I think that there has to be a cap on this. There has to be the utmost background check done on somebody before you administer something that's foreign to their body that may or may not help them, may hurt them. I should be going to my doctor first before I go to the lab to see if I'm able to take any substance that they want to give me.
Yeah, no, that's outstanding, because you're exactly right. People it's not that testosterone can't help a number of people, but it also can hurt a number of people. And to give the sports analogy, people should be wearing a helmet sometimes when they go into some places, because they have got to go in a little bit more defensively, because so much is coming at them in such a short period of time. And they're making these decisions very quickly that have huge impacts on their greater health. So they should be given more time to consider the pros and cons and then make that decision with their doctor.
And the question that lingers, and I've asked my doctors this, I've asked some really good urologists this question: did my bout with testosterone injections, did my schedule, my 3-month schedule, did that accelerate, or could that accelerate my prostate cancer from a mild cancer to a Gleason 9? Is there evidence to suggest it could do that? I mean, you tell me.
Well, we don't know. This has been such a big industry with so many people participating, especially over the last decade, that we don't know all the ins and the outs. But the reality is, several things we know happens. One, it can make the prostate grow, which can put out more PSA, which can lead to more investigation. The second thing is that it can potentially make a cancer that's already there grow a little bit more. The question is, can it evolve from something that was benign or mild to something more aggressive? We don't have all the answers to that. So you're sort of caught in this middle ground where the people who are pro-testosterone would say, hey, look, Vic, we gave you testosterone, your PSA went up, and lo and behold, they found this tumor that was already there that was ugly. Whereas the people who are anti-testosterone would say, well, hey, Vic, had you not received this testosterone, maybe this thing would have stayed dormant for a longer period of time and you wouldn't have to worry. So that's where we are, where people are just kind of caught between the pros and the cons of not having enough knowledge. But what we do know is that giving someone testosterone is a serious, big-time decision. It's not as simple as, hey, are you grumpy today? Are you getting less sleep? Now here, have some testosterone. So in the end, you're really doing a lot of people a service, because it's really about just being more of an advocate for yourself before you make some of these decisions.
I think you just hit it there. And, this hit me in the middle of this is, why haven't I done more to sort of be my own doctor? And I get it. You have, men especially, I don't get it why we're so averse to getting ourselves checked out, so afraid to speak up. So, the women have done such a good job in the breast cancer industry of finding what's wrong and not being afraid to go in and ask questions. We as men, I know I was like, yeah, give me whatever you think I need. I don't know, whatever. I'm good, whatever. I never did any homework. I never did my due diligence. I didn't really care. We need to care more.
Absolutely. I'll tell you, when we say where we need better education and we need to care more, I'll tell you from my experience how bad it still is. When PCRI called me and said, there's a guy who works for the Denver Nuggets, who does some work, has his own show. He's well known in the broadcast area, especially in Denver and Denver sports. and he wants to talk about, he's a young man who was diagnosed at 49, and he wants to talk about his prostate cancer. I went, really? In other words, it's so unusual that people actually in your situation want to talk about it, or actually volunteer to want to talk about it, that it sort of grabbed me and thinking, what, he wants to talk about it. I'm not used to that. I'm used to, 78-year-old men wanting to talk about it. I'm not used to 49-year-old guys wanting to talk about it.
Well, it's funny you say that, because I've surrounded myself. It's not necessarily a support group, but I've met so many men my age, even younger, that I talk to on a daily, weekly basis who are going through this, that I'm like, wait, you're 45 and you have this? You're 51? What, you're 49? And you meet more and more people, and it's an atrocity, to be honest with you, that more people don't want to talk. I guess my whole take on this, doctor, is why wouldn't you? I didn't cause this. This is something that hits you. What's the fear in discussing how to better attack prostate cancer testing and screening, and how to make it more effective? Why are people so scared of this?
I mean, do you have 4 hours? We can watch highlights of the Broncos' last Super Bowl and talk about it.
Yeah.
Part of the problem I still see in the younger age groups is just sheer vulnerability. The idea of putting yourself out there is completely something that a lot of men just do not want to do or be a part of, which I think is the opposite today. I think people are revered and they're looked up to today for wanting to talk about it, especially in the younger age groups. But it's a vulnerability option. It's that's part of the problem. There's this idea that they're faced by very little, that men don't have to talk about these issues. They don't want to talk about what could have possibly brought them down. They want to talk about moving forward. But I don't know how you can move forward without looking backward.
True. And, there are so many organizations like your own, the ones that I deal with now, that go above and beyond to try to educate. And I pain myself on a daily basis. What can we do more to educate? What can we do more to have young men take ownership of this? And I wonder a lot. It happened to me because I work in the sports field, and there's a young pro athlete who went through cancer of a different kind, who motivated me to go get checked. What motivates guys to do it? Is it fear? Some people run from fear. What is it? And that's the thing I think we have to find out. We have to master that. How is it we can motivate more people my age to make sure that this is not something they run from, that's something they embrace?
Yeah, well said. In fact, since we're being honest guys with each other, I'll even take another step in my candidness with you and tell you why I thought it was so strange and almost spiritual that when they told me your name and you wanted to talk about it, I almost fell back in my chair. And I can give you a sports comparison, an analogy. It's almost getting philosophical.
Sure.
But so I thought, wait a second. His name is Vic Lombardi. And Vince Lombardi, who was coach of the Packers, who when I was younger looked like an older guy. But in reality, what people don't know is he actually died in his 50s from colon cancer, colorectal cancer.
Yes.
Okay, so he was known for a lot of great things. What he was also known for, and ahead of his time, was equality in sports and pushing for his players, and that's all great. But on the antithesis of that is he was also known for don't get near me. I don't want to be screened. Even if I'm not feeling well, I don't want to look into it. So if you go through the history of Vince Lombardi in his 50s, he was actually symptomatic for a while and didn't want any sort of testing. We didn't have colonoscopy and all these other things, but they had testing. And only until it had been, they found it aggressively and advanced, did they really know that it essentially was terminal and was a problem. So here I've got guys who are not much different in age. They're in sports. They have somewhat similar names. One wants to talk about it and be screened early, and the other person doesn't want to talk about it and doesn't want to be screened. That's just like an incredible sports dichotomy to me. Am I taking too much CBD?
No. You're exactly right. Listen, no one's more of a Vince Lombardi fanatic than I am. I mean, I have a huge. I mean, my whole office here is littered with Vince Lombardi phrases, sayings, his credo. I've read every book. I've watched every, and it didn't hit me until you just said that. You're exactly right. And I guess people would describe he's a man's man, right? Vince Lombardi, tough, gruff. There's no defense, no defense he couldn't solve, no offense he couldn't figure out. That's what coaches do. There's no playbook for this that you can suddenly put into place to beat cancer. I mean, if you don't let the people that know it best handle it, then you're done. And I think that mentality sort of took roots with him, and it does with a lot of others. I know what you're saying. I know exactly what you're saying and how you feel. And I guess that's where we differ is, listen, I know what I know, and I know what I don't know. I know nothing about this. I need help. Perhaps he just was so sheltered, as a lot of coaches are, as a lot of men are. You get so sheltered and narrow-minded and focused on your career that you don't allow anyone else to bother you. You don't want to be bothered. It's time. I don't want to bother with that stuff. Well, it's about time we remind ourselves it's okay to be bothered. Do you want to live or not?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's why I think it was such a spiritual moment with the names. And you kind of look back and you wonder, we don't know if it would have made the difference or not, but you wonder, had he been able to live long enough to become an advocate for men's health or screening, you wonder how the situation might have changed.
What's interesting too, in all his documentaries and all the books, they don't focus very much on how, they talk about his death. He died of cancer. But those chapters are minimal. They're like this. The Vince Lombardi era talks about all the things he achieved. But I'm really curious as to what happened in those late years. How did it go down so fast? What was it? What was it? Too late, too little, too late? There's so much of it that's never been documented. That's very interesting.
Yeah. I know that they called him a butcher's son, so he loved red meat. He loved to consume red meat, and I know he was a smoker because you could see him in films. And what I understand is the reason he quit smoking before his death, when he was still on the sideline, was that his mother called and said, "Look, what kind of role model are you if you're walking around with a cigarette in your mouth on the sidelines of a football game?" And that was his motivation to quit. So it's incredible, the dichotomy there, that whole parallel universe with your name and his name and what you did, and and what he accomplished and what he wasn't able to do or feel comfortable with. So again, I think that's a compliment to you and to going forward and younger men doing something. So also, you said, you didn't know what a prostate was. I mean, maybe you thought it was the 51st state of the United States. I know a lot of people don't know what a prostate is. But now, okay, you're going into surgery. How did you even become knowledgeable about your treatment or what's going to occur to you after treatment? There's a catch with every treatment. So if you want to get rid of cancer and you want to try to live a long life, can you walk the audience through side effects from treatment and what you knew and what actually happened?
Well, the reason I've gotten immersed in this is, I'm a journalist by trade. I'm curious by trade. I immerse myself in whatever subject matter I'm in. If I'm interviewing somebody, I spend hours researching who that somebody is. And with this, I was told firsthand, don't spend too much time on the internet. It's bad for you. Well, guess what I did? I spent every waking minute on the internet, researching every angle, every doctor, every therapy, every single thing. So that's sort of where I came about, some of the background on this. In terms of the treatment itself and the surgery is a scary, when you say you're going to have prostate surgery, it's scary, right? Oh my gosh. The robotic surgery was the easiest thing I've ever gone through. I mean, I just went to the doctor and got a cavity filled the other day. That was worse than the actual surgery. Okay. The surgery for me, it was the best 4 hours of sleep I've ever gotten in my life. You go under, you wake up, you have a couple scars here. The doctor who administered it, Dr. Paul Moroney here at the UC Health Center, did a wonderful job. He took 31 of my lymph nodes as well. So there was a lot of other things. He was very detailed, spent a lot of time going to work in there. I said, take it all. Take whatever you need to take. Just make sure you get it. That didn't bother me. Now, the incontinence was an issue. I mean, going shopping with your son for diapers, that was fun. That was eye-opening because you didn't know about the incontinence. But that was cured just weeks after I took care of it. I did my Kegels. I did all the things that they taught me. I highly suggest anyone that goes through prostate cancer to hit the Kegels hard. I actually got therapy done. I went to see people who helped us understand how to do proper Kegels. And I'm convinced that being in shape, having good fitness routine, that helped me with the incontinence faster than normal. I mean, I was jogging 3 weeks after surgery. I was playing golf 5 weeks after surgery. I was on my bike 6 weeks after surgery. So I was ahead of schedule. And I'm convinced I was ahead of schedule because I did my work, put in your work. And here I am now 15 months later. And I can honestly tell you, knock on wood, I'm in the best shape of my life, relatively speaking. I mean, I can't do what I did as a kid, but in terms of my body, how I feel, I'm in great shape because I'm more aware of my body than I ever have been before.
Wow, that's an amazing story. Yeah, so the health of the person going into the procedure is one of the greatest predictors of the health of the person coming out of the procedure.
Yeah,
you identified that exactly. Now, the two words that people are uncomfortable talking about, and if you are, let me know, is after surgery, there's the discussion of incontinence, so that got better quickly. What about the sexual dysfunction?
Sexual dysfunction is an issue for me. Not as much as I thought it'd be, but there's some times that I'm like, what is going on here? But boy, the chemicals they've come up with work. The pills have worked for me, and you do what you can. I'm not gonna lie to you. It's not like I was, Will Chamberlain beforehand. It wasn't. I have 3 kids. They're grown. I'm not going to be running around partying. So I guess it's not as deep an issue, profound an issue for me and my wife as it is for some men. There are some men. I have a good friend of mine here in town who was hit with this dreadful disease at the age of 53, who wanted to start a family. He didn't have any kids. He did not have any kids. And man, that was a tough endeavor for him. So the surgery was a question about whether or not he wanted to go that route, and he eventually did. So I know for others it means more. It's not my priority, and I don't mean to demean it, but the sex life thing to me is not a reason to shy away from this therapy. It just isn't. It doesn't carry me like some other. I want to live. I want to play golf. I want to run. Those are more important to me.
Were there any other? So you mentioned earlier the incontinence improved quickly. Were there any other surprises within several months after surgery, or anything else revealed to you that you just did not expect? Or maybe you did expect something?
I expected to feel this longer. I expected to feel like I had cancer, and I didn't. There's the mental health aspect of it that I think is somewhat overlooked. Every 3 months going in and getting a PSA test, right? So, because of my Gleason score and the aggressive nature, I have to go in more often than some would. Heck, and I'm built differently. I'd take a test every day if I had to. Just I'm one of those kind of guys. I'm a creature like, let me know, where is it? How's it going? Let me know. Is it risen? So you have that anxiety that comes with that. PSA anxiety every 3 months. I just got my most recent one 2 weeks ago. And, those days building up to it, you're like, man, I feel great. I'm going to go in. I'm going to, give my blood. I'm going to look at my portal here that every hospital has now. And I'm going to slowly open that portal, and it's going to say undetectable. Please say undetectable. Please say less than 0.01. And there's a mental game you play with yourself. And it's not, again, you feel fatigued because mentally you're wearing yourself out. Am I going to be undetectable? Because the numbers that they gave you originally, when I was told that my Gleason score and the kind of cancer I had carries a 70% reoccurrence rate, that number remains stuck in my brain. 70%. What do you mean 70? So 70% chance that I'm going to go through this again, maybe through radiation, maybe through ADT. I mean, what's happening here? So you're fighting that more than anything else. The mental aspect is much tougher for me than the physical aspect.
And what about that mental aspect, or just the entire aspect of what you saw the family go through during this whole time? Did they handle it in a smooth fashion, or was it turmoil? Was it difficult? How did that play out?
Yeah, my kids were fine. I'm sort of a jokester. I have fun with them, so they were never freaked out. I mean, maybe internally they were. My wife, a little different. My wife had lost both parents in a span of 9 months to cancer before I was diagnosed. That all happened within a year. So, it's one on top of the other. So she lost her mother, she lost her father, and then all of a sudden I'm diagnosed with cancer. I mean, it's just one thing after another. So, we got through that. Today, it's as if it never happened. And I don't want them to think I'm walking around as a cancer victim by any means. You want to make sure that they're free of that. And they are. I mean, my family's good with it. Right now, there's no reminder until those days come, until they know that, it must be a PSA check, right? There's no reminder that I have anything wrong with me or that I had anything wrong with me in the last couple of years. So I'm lucky. I'm very happy and lucky to have a family that sort of goes with the flow there.
Are there any other aspects to the whole, whether it was before diagnosis, after diagnosis, the treatment, after treatment, is there any other aspect of your journey that you want to emphasize that possibly we missed in this story? Anything else that strikes you?
I guess one other aspect, I mean, the age thing bothers me. Again, I can't stand when I tell people, and it happens all the time, I'll go play golf. And the other day I was golfing with an older gentleman, and I told him, he heard about my prostate cancer. And he said, yeah, that's easy. I had it done too. I got radiation, no problem. And so I said, what was your Gleason score? And he didn't know. And, and you get hit with this old man's disease, and so many people that go through it, they don't realize that there's a difference between Gleason 9 and Gleason 6.
Mm-hmm.
It's all under one umbrella. It's all prostate cancer. So you tell somebody you have prostate cancer, and they're like, oh, well, the Gleason 6 is the one people think of, the one that you can wait and see, the one that you can live until you're 85, that something else will kill you before the cancer. I didn't have that luxury. Gleason 9 will kill you. And there are more and more younger people with these aggressive types of prostate cancers. And that bothers me, that there's no distinction. There's no differentiation there. It's almost like there should be two different names, two different, yes, I have prostate cancer. I'm under the window prostate. But mine is different than yours. Each is different than someone else's. And I think it's a little danger zone there that we all pile them into one little neat area here, and it's all one disease.
Well said. So what about your family history, though? Was there any hint that anything was going on within your family if you go through the family disease tree, as I call it?
We did that. I did a lot of that. I did the genome test. I did the genetic testing, all that, and nothing came up. I wasn't predisposed. My grandmother on my mother's side had breast cancer, and that's the only sign of it. There's no one else with any cancerous tumors, anything. When I was a kid, when I was 26 years old, I had a basal cell cancer removed from my nose. That was the only other time. But there was no predisposition to think that I was going to have this disease, and the family history is pretty clean. I know people that there's a lot I've met of guys who, well, his dad had it, his uncle had it, his brother had it. Well, by God, you better go get checked. That you better go get checked. And it's funny. That's another thing that bothers me. I got a younger brother who's 47. He's 4 years my minor, and so as soon as I was diagnosed, he went to his doctor and said, hey, I want to get a PSA exam. And his doctor at the time said, no, you're too young. And my brother said, wait a minute. My brother just went through this at 49. I'm 47. So they wouldn't give him the test. And I finally said, go to another doctor. Just leave him, but go to another doctor. I just think that's ridiculous, right? I mean, we don't know if there's family history already, but if somebody chooses to get it done, why is there such a pushback not to get it done? I don't get it.
Yeah, well, it's the same reason I think we were talking that it's unusual for a young guy like you to do an interview like this.
Yeah.
It is. I think that's changing, and I'm seeing a little bit more, but we're still have so far to go. Because let's say that situation was in breast cancer. You had a sister, same ages, same situation.
Uh-huh.
One sister was a little older. They found an aggressive tumor, otherwise healthy. They would immediately focus in on the rest of the family.
Sure. Yeah. And that goes back to, this is an old man's disease and you have time. It's slow growing. It's an old man's disease. I don't like the narrative that we've woven into prostate cancer. Some people do have time. You're exactly right. Some people do. Some people don't. I've heard the opposite. I've heard some really sad stories of people that have caught this way too late. A guy I know that was 47 who had back pains, immense back pains, and it already metastasized, and it was too late. And he passed away in February. I was on the phone with him in September. Months earlier, talking to him, he was doing great. He passed away in February. So, listen, I get it. I understand that this is a huge campaign with so many people involved, but I just want to make sure that we treat everyone differently, because every one of us have a different version of this cancer.
Yeah. I mean, imagine if, give you a crude analogy. Imagine if I walked around saying 9 o'clock's the same thing as 6 o'clock. And they would say, what are you talking about?
Sure.
Hell yeah, no, it's the same thing. No, it's not. It's 3 hours difference.
Yeah.
It's slow growing maybe when it's a 6, but when you're talking about 8s and 9s, it's a totally different situation. This is a heterogeneous disease. It's not one size fits all. And you're a classic example of that. Yeah. So, the interesting thing is you're also in an area which I know well, that University of Colorado there's another group called TUCC. I mean, it's some of the top prostate people in the country are right there in your backyard.
Yeah, and I'm lucky. And it's not too far away. I'm actually doing a podcast in conjunction with the University of Colorado system. It's called Unstoppable, where we interview athletes. We interviewed anybody associated with athletics. Dick Vitale was one of our recent, just about things they've overcome, obstacles they've overcome. And then we take that interview and interview one of the doctors who might be an expert in that field. So it's really cool. So they've shed some light on a lot of things that before I would stick my head in the sand. I wouldn't care. Now I care.
Do you see some of the sports teams recognizing prostate cancer in the future like they recognize other conditions?
It's a good question. That goes back to the, hey, we're young, we're fine, we're unbeatable, nothing will bother us. There's a gentleman that's in the Nuggets organization who had prostate cancer, and I had no idea. Not until I was diagnosed and I had surgery did he tell me about his situation. And I worked with this guy every single day. He had the same surgery, went through the same process, and I had no clue that he had the disease. So listen, man, I don't care where you are. And sports, the macho-ness of sports is one of those areas where I think there are too many people that just they want to be done with it. They don't want to talk about it. And I want to change that. I want you to talk about it.
Yeah. No, I really appreciate that. We've talked so much about your situation and about prostate cancer that do you mind if I break off for one more moment before we finish up today from talk about something else?
No problem. Go ahead.
Is it true that your favorite movie is Rocky?
Oh, no doubt about it. No movie elicits more emotion out of me than watching Rocky. It was so well done. To me, it was the perfect movie. It doesn't have to have an ending that is Hollywood. He loses in the end. He lost. Yeah. And yet it's so riveting and it's so uplifting and it's everything about that movie. It's the perfect movie.
That's really interesting. So what about another sports movie like Rudy or one of these Notre Dame movies?
Rudy is a little Rudy. I mean, I'll watch it since it's my school, but it's a little gimmicky because I know the real story behind. Listen, nothing about Rocky, and I know that it was loosely based on a former fighter, but Rocky's a classic. Rudy's sort of a remake of Rocky on the football side.
Yeah. No, I mean Rocky. I'm almost 56, and Rocky for me was the movie, the sports movie, right? Growing up.
Especially when you know that Sylvester Stallone wrote it in like two days. He wrote the screenplay. He did it all. He acted in it. I mean, it was almost a one-man play, for crying out loud. So I think it was a brilliant, brilliant movie.
Huh. That's incredible. So my last question is, unless I missed something, you should let me know. My last question is, okay, I mean, I hate to be very cliche on this question, but what's the next 3 to 5 look like for you? You know, if you look out in the next 3 to 5 years, I mean, are you looking to work less, work more, get more involved in prostate cancer? I mean, are there certain goals you have right on the horizon that's different than right now?
It's a great question. I ask myself that daily. I don't know. A lot of it will be based on my diagnoses that follow. I want to continue to enjoy life. I want to continue to work in sports. I want to continue doing what I'm doing. But most importantly to me, this is principal to my fears originally, I want to remain active. To me, the perfect day is getting up in the morning, exercising, doing whatever work I have to be doing, going to play golf, riding my bike up Lookout Mountain over here, playing basketball with my buddies, pick up basketball. I still play. If I'm not active, I'm not happy. So I have to remain active, which is why, I hear these stories. Surgery, to me, it was done. I got over it. But when you have to do the androgen deprivation therapy, and I haven't had to do that yet, knock on wood, and it leads to extreme fatigue, I want no part of that. I don't want to do that. So I want to stay away from that as much as I can for as long as I can. So when I look toward the future, I look at those tests that come up, those PSA tests, and I want to see that less than 0. I want to see that every time, because if that starts ticking up and I have to go that route, the radiation and the ADT, then I know that, then it becomes a nuisance again. I don't want it to be a nuisance. I want it to, I want to beat it as best I can, do what I can. And if that means eating better and exercising and doing everything I can, giving myself every fighting chance to remain active, that's exactly what I'm going to do.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm notorious when I do these interviews for asking for something at the end, and the person I ask usually can't say no because they're being filmed. So they feel obligated to say yes to me. So I'm gonna ask for a favor, if you don't mind. It's a very simplistic favor. Not only do I agree with most of what you said here today, in fact, all of what you said about, why aren't men talking more? We're not talking enough also about lifestyle after treatment. So I was hoping that for PCRI's sake, I don't even care if it's 5 sentences. Would you mind doing me a favor and writing down your top 5 lifestyle tips after surgery of how you got back to looking how you look now or feeling now? I don't care if it's all plant-based, maybe it's not plant-based, maybe it's something else in moderation, like you said, less sugar. Whatever worked for you personally, I think people want to know, not just have the interview. What's your workout as well as your diet regimen look like post-treatment? Sure. That fascinates me and other people watching this. Can we ask you to put that on paper, even 1 page?
No problem. I could do that very easily. In fact, I try and push that stuff upon people, and I don't want to be a pest, but I'd be happy to do that.
Now you watch in a year, when we post this, you watch how much attention that 1 page gets compared to a lot of videos out there. You're going to be shocked. This is my prediction, that it's going to be overwhelming how many people just want to know what you did after your surgery to get to where you are now, not just physically, but mentally, in the way you talk to me and the energy that you have.
Well, I appreciate that. I think people want to get, what's the trick, right? Everybody wants to know what the trick is. Well, it's not a trick. It's work. You got to put in the work, baby. If you don't work, it ain't going to work.
That's right. And so I love to hear your specific regimen. People have different regimens, but I'd love to hear the one that you're doing there in Denver.
Sounds good. You got it.
Thank you. Listen, I hope we can do this again sometime. I really appreciate the time you gave to me and the candidness, and I can't wait to cross paths again. So thank you.
And thank you for what you do. Thank you for everyone involved in this. Again, without everybody here, I'm not where I'm at either. I'm not as educated as I need to be. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Have a great Father's Day.
All right. You too.
I will.
Thank
you.
Thank you so much, Vic, and thank you, Dr. Moyad. That was great. We'll be right back with Dr. Moyad in just a minute, but I wanted to remind you that PCRI is funded by your donations. We're able to provide free webinars, our website, and our helpline because of your contributions. If you want to support us, you can go ahead and click the donation link in the description below. Your donations help us out immensely. All right, I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Moyad, and he's going to share some of his health tips.
Thank you, Alex. I appreciate it. I appreciate your leadership. I just appreciate you. And I also appreciate our technic, is that such a word? Technical person behind the scenes. His name is Peter. He's one of my closest friends right now. At least I make him think that because he's doing all the work behind the scenes. Actually, he's fabulous. He's making this conference happen. What I don't appreciate are these new glasses that were given to me as a gift of turning older. And I realized in my last segment with Vic Lombardi, not Vince Lombardi, but Vic Lombardi, I realized in the last segment that I was touching my glasses too much. My hair looked very funny. I haven't had a haircut in 5 months. I'm really not very attractive right now. I tend to look a lot more attractive when Peter can airbrush my photos and airbrush many of our video segments from PCRI. So what I want to do is I want to live on the edge, take the glasses off, and see if I can go without the glasses. So obviously I won't be reading any cue cards. So what Alex did, I want to reiterate, I probably don't say it enough, is that some of these advocacy groups like PCRI, they need donations to function and do all these great things. And it's critically important. And I think it's also critically important because donations also keep the whole process objective. So what I'm pledging today is a whole big wad of cash, and I'm going to be sending it over there. I think I bet on a horse or something, and I won big time. But in all seriousness, I really hope you can donate, because whether it's this broadcast, whether it's the big conference, whether it was the big spring broadcast, whether it's the actual hotline or the patient support line that answers thousands upon thousands of questions a year, whether it's all the educational material. In fact, we'll talk about a new piece of material called the Men's Health Checklist. All these things take time, and with time, it takes money, and they function on a very lean budget, which is fabulous. But I think all I can tell you is if you can donate today, be it $1, several $1,000,000, please do that. And then after you donate to them, please donate to me and my beer fund or some other fund like that. Okay, so we talked to Vic Lombardi, very well known in the Denver area in terms of sports. Great interview, I thought, touched on some important things. And what's amazing is that I don't like the fact that he looks so groomed and so polished. He actually looks fabulous. So I was a little jealous. So I thought I would challenge him to send me his 5 lifestyle tips. And not only did he accept the challenge, he sent them immediately. So, but again, I want to reiterate the biggest problem I had with Vic Lombardi in terms of an interview is he went to Notre Dame. And so not everyone can be perfect. I still have my Beat Notre Dame badge. And for those people who think I'm completely and totally obsessed with Michigan, you're completely wrong. I am not. I'm not obsessed with Michigan. This is the mask, though, I wear when I'm outside of my house. And this is my hat I wear when outside the house. And this is the football I play with when I'm outside the house. And this is the pillow I use for my back because I'm getting older and sometimes I get back pain. This was actually made by a person in advocacy in Alaska. Their daughter actually made this for me, which was so fabulous. And then there's my Michigan bottle opener. Anyway, I have digressed. So here he sends me these, and we'll put these online. And I looked at them, and they're actually really good in terms of his lifestyle tips after surgery when he got the thumbs up to be able to do what he wanted to do, which is true. After any prostate cancer treatment or during it, you want to have that discussion with your healthcare team saying, I want to optimize my Moya lifestyle program. What can I do? And this is what he learned. And all of these recommendations are very good. And let me talk about those a little bit. And then I'll talk about Vic Lombardi one more time. Then we'll review the men's health checklist, and then we'll go out and have some fun this weekend. And but we still have to social distance. Anyhow, here's his top 5 lifestyle tips for Dr. Moyad. Number 1, drum roll, please. There's no drum roll. Okay. Sugar-free is where to be. Let me repeat that. Sugar-free is where to be. Now, if some of you notice that I have a lot more energy in my hair comb since the last segment, it's because I've had a little bit of caffeine and I realize I need to look more attractive. What does sugar-free is where to be mean? It means that he's gone, for him, what's worked is more of a low-carb profile. So he put, I used to be a sugarholic, and after my diagnosis, I eliminated most desserts. Oof, hold on a second. That's painful. I eliminated most desserts, sweets. Oh, that's even more painful. Bread, pasta, anything with sugar. So what he's talking about are not only the simple sugars, but also the greater category of sugars, which is carbohydrates. And what's important about that is that that is a classic low-carb diet. And low-carb diet actually has data as of this year in prostate cancer patients. I had to review that paper. That came from Sinai Grace, a research team there. They actually took men who had recurrence from their primary treatment and put them on extremely low-carb diet and found that it was safe, and it seemed to give hints. Now, this is only 6 months. It seemed, compared to the control group, to give hints that it was doing something for them prostate cancer-wise, and that's going to be looked in further. We could talk about that study in the future. But that was a fabulous study done. What they did notice, which I remember reporting on quite well this year when I had to do this review for other doctors, is that the average weight loss in that low-carb group within about 6 months was about 20 to 25 pounds. Let me repeat that, 20 to 25 pounds. Now, this is more of an extreme low-carb where you're basically you're doing 30, 40, and in some cases about 20 grams carbs on average per day, which is very difficult. You want to talk about sort of moving toward a keto region. But anyway, they did what worked for them. They got great weight loss. They can't definitively say there was an impact on PSA, but they're becoming more heart healthy. And I think this great study actually showed was that there are all sorts of dietary plans that can work for you. And the one that you can stick with is actually the best one that you should do. In other words, it should be all personalized. Some people love to do low carbohydrate. Other people hate it. Like, for example, me, you take away my bread, I'm going to wrestle you. I'm going to wrestle you to the ground until you do tap out. That's what I'm going to do because I got to have my bread. But for other people, that works quite well. But what people learn with low-carb dieting, as with any type of dieting, is they learn more about food and they learn more about portion control. And I like it. Now, I remember there were a couple of questions from the study. Side effects were very minimal. But one side effect that tends to happen from low-carb is constipation or bowel movement issues. And the reason people forget is we're used to in society saying that there are good fats and bad fats. And that's fine. That's one way to break it down. But we also have good carbs and bad carbs. You could look at it like that within the confines of the low-carb diet. People forget that there's one type of carbohydrate that doesn't get absorbed and is absolutely needed by humans everywhere on this planet, and that's called fiber or dietary fiber. I'm not talking about the commercial stuff or the supplemental type or the powders. I'm talking about real dietary fiber, the kind I got yesterday from my lentil soup. And then today, before I did this filming, my GI tract said, "Thank you, appreciate it. The train is going to move on time, Dr. Moyad." So I'm trying not to get too graphic. Peter, I can see you. Am I getting too graphic in this? No, he says not. He can handle this. He deals with Schultz and other people who are far more graphic than I am. So one thing to work on when you are doing low carb is you need a fiber source. Sometimes a supplemental fiber source is good enough, but arguably you want to look at foods that have a little bit more fiber so you don't have, at least when you start out, the slow-moving train issue. You want the regular, on-time Moyad train. You don't want the train to come too fast, and you don't want the train to come too slow. You want Moyad time train. On time, every day. You can almost put your watch to it, and you don't need to bring reading material. Okay, what else happens when you go really low carb, or even when you go keto, if you want to call it? Another thing that can happen when you don't get enough fiber is you can develop fatigue. You get a little tired. So it's important in any diet plan. Diet is one part of it, but it needs to be married to some type of regular aerobic and resistance activity. What regular aerobic exercise does for you while you are on a diet or making dietary changes is it helps you maintain your lean muscle mass. If you lose a lot of weight, whether it's from bariatric surgery, whether it is from any diet plan out there, and you lose a lot of weight quickly, including these protein diets and shake-based diets, you can also lose a lot of muscle mass. When you lose a lot of muscle mass initially, it can affect your metabolism. When your metabolism is affected, it can affect your energy levels. So part of the reason I have more energy during this segment is that essentially this morning, I went on a run and I came back and I just felt better. And then I realized this is part of the day, not just caffeine, but my exercise does work for me in terms of giving me an energy level that allows me to talk incessantly until you're completely bored. But I feel all this ego confidence of being able to feel like I'm an expert by talking incessantly and never being quiet. All right, so let's go back to his first lifestyle tip, which I agree with. Sugar-free is where to be. You should look throughout your diet, where are you getting some of your highest amount of calories? And what we've learned in my generation is that some of the highest concentration of calories are coming from carbohydrates. They are absolutely coming from carbohydrates. There's something that I always teach. I always say I'm not worried about the plant-based burgers. I don't worry about those. That's good for them. I worry about the bun on top and the bottom of the plant-based burger. That's where you get all your calories, and that's where you get most of the calories in a burger anyway. So being more sensitive to carbs, sugar-free is where you want to be. This also brings up the potential topic of artificial sweeteners. And artificial sweeteners, people get very emotional about them, like they make such a difference. We really haven't found that they've made such a difference in terms of weight loss. For a very small percentage of the population, it can help, and if it does, good for you. You can look around, see which one you're comfortable with, but for the most part, what's been found in studies thus far, and the reason why artificial sweeteners haven't been that successful, is that when someone goes to an artificial sweetener, let's say a diet drink, they make up for the calories just someplace else. Hey, maybe more ice cream, maybe more donuts, you name it. So it's an interesting approach, but the bigger picture of reducing carb intake or sugar-free to reduce overall caloric concentration or amount, it's a good way to go. My final point on this, I think I've said my final point about 18 times. My final point on this is that as you get older, Peter doesn't understand this because he's half my age sitting there. So he's at the age where he thinks, I'm bulletproof. I don't know what this old man's talking about. Hurry up and get this done. I got to eat my lunch. But we don't just age on the outside, except for me. We don't just age on the outside. We age on the inside, and that has to be appreciated more often. And I've tried to emphasize that at PCRI events over and over again. We are cars that are not plugged in. We're not electric cars. We are cars that run around, and internally our parts get rusty and they get old, and that includes the GI tract. And that's why people will tell me all the time as they get in their 40s, 50s, 60s, just by reducing their carb load, they feel better. They have a little bit more energy. They feel lighter. They feel like they can do things. not only being sensitive to the sun as you get older in terms of skin cancer risk, people forget that what we should tell men and women and everybody is that you have to be sensitive to most things as you get older because you become more vulnerable. And that includes what you put into your GI tract. When I was 25, or let's say when I was in med school, I could put stuff in my GI tract that if I put this in a book, I would probably be put in jail. But I had no problems digesting it. If I put some of those things again in my GI tract, I would be in big trouble. I think you know what I'm talking about. Okay, we got done with one. I think in the next 4 or 5 hours, you should get done with the other 4 tips. Number 2, actually read the labels. Let me repeat as to what Vic Lombardi says. Actually read the labels. Remember, Vic Lombardi, top-notch broadcaster in the Denver area, very good-looking man, just picked the wrong college. And that's unfortunate. Not everyone is perfect. Actually read the labels. He says, stay away from foods that contain hard-to-pronounce preservatives and chemicals. Could not agree more. If you aren't seeing what's considered more organic, or I hate to use the word natural, but chemicals that make sense or compounds that make sense in there, then there's the problem. As I always like to say, some of the unhealthiest foods in the grocery store come from foods that have the most health ads on their label, because they have to go for all these potential indications, and they put all these things in there to give the appearance that they're healthier than they are. The healthiest foods in the grocery store tend to have 0 advertisements in terms of health benefits. And you've got to go find those. He also says you'd be surprised how many weird chemicals you're going to find in a package of beep. I won't say the company name because the product he mentions I love. So I don't want to disparage or say something bad about this product because I also like my sweet tooth. He goes, man, I miss these things, you know. Thinks more on the line of certain types of cookies, you know, snacks. I understand. I would want him to have one once in a while, but not go back to these. Reading the labels and what he says here is critical. And let me also add to that, understanding what you're reading and being gracious to yourself, that what you're able to read today is going to be very different than 12 months from now. So I can now see a label after all these years, understand every single compound in there. And you'll see that's how it is. It's learning a language. And it's learning a really, really fun language when you start to learn to read labels, because this is what's impacting you internally and externally. And so that's just a great tip. Number 3, put the work in your workouts. Put the work in your workouts. He says any workout you can do while chatting on your phone is not a workout. Not a workout. You need to sweat, man. I put the man part in there because I wanted to sound groovy. You need to sweat. You need to suffer. He's basically saying no pain, no gain. And he should understand that. He went to Notre Dame. So the reality is that he's right again. We tend to think of workouts as something that we're going to do with a little bit of free time. So whenever I was traveling in the old days, which was before the pandemic, all the time, it would make me crazy at workout facilities is I would see some guy on the phone there doing bike, taking breaks. That's not a workout. And so the reason that workouts such as HIIT, high intensity interval training, is getting so much attention, where you go all out for a little while, if you're able to, even for just a minute, is when you break that sweat, what we're realizing is that's when you start to produce these compounds called endorphins. And you not only produce these and they show up in the bloodstream, they show up in tissues, they show up in your CSF, in your brain. And so now we realize that the mental benefits of physical activity are as valuable as the physical benefits of physical activity, because with a workout, when you break a sweat, it's also a signal to start turning on some of these protective compounds and these heart healthy, mentally healthy compounds that we were never truly able to appreciate. I always like to say that new research with smoking shows that within a couple months of someone starting smoking, it already begins to change or alter your genome, most genes in the body, somewhere between, depending on the study you're looking at, a quarter to 1/3 of the genes are changing. But now we're learning with these massive government independent-based studies that it's probably very likely also on the antithesis that when you exercise, you start to alter genetic activity in a way that favors you mentally and physically. So the idea of eliminating a distraction so you're able to do an adequate workout, I don't care if that's swimming, I don't care if that's biking, I don't care if it's vigorous walking, we tend to see benefits there. There's one benefit in urology and oncology and prostate health. There's one benefit that people don't talk about enough, and that when people are physically active, you are more likely to go in deeper phases of sleep when you go to bed. Another thing that gets robbed with our body as we get older is our ability to go into what's called NREM. There's Rem sleep, which is also compromised as we get older, and REM is where you're flashing your eyelids, and that means you're dreaming. But then there's NREM, and NREM comes into 3 different stages. And the third stage is the deepest phase of sleep. That's where you get such deep sleep. When you wake up, you feel refreshed. And what we've realized, and actually this is studies going back almost 2 decades of elderly individuals, that just walking or getting exercise in daily is more likely to put you into that NREM 3. So even though you lose part of your sleep efficiency as you get older, you can cheat. By being physically active, you're more likely to go into deep phases of sleep. All right. Let's go to number 4. How are we doing, Peter? Are we doing all right? All right. He says, speed it up, you loser. At least he's candid with me. All right. Lean and mean. Lean and mean. Number 4. He says cardio is essential, but so is strength training. Let's just contemplate that for a second. Namaste, my man. I can't say it enough. Cardio is essential, but so is strength conditioning. Gotta do both. Mix it up. If you're an avid cyclist, mix in some bench press or bicep curls 2 days a week. The body needs balance. We have a disease going on in the American population and globally called sarcopenia. Sarco meaning flesh, penia meaning lack of. What we're seeing as people get older and they put on weight is they're putting on adipose tissue, fat tissue, and it's compromising lean muscle mass. So they're becoming less muscular with age. As you become less muscular, you do become less balanced. You do lose energy. You don't become stronger or more physically fit. So supporting your bones, for example, is not just about making the bones healthier. It's making all the structures around the bones healthier, which is essentially nerves and muscles. Muscles surround those. That's why we tend to see people have a lower rate of breaks from osteoporosis or osteopenia when they have more muscle mass. Muscle mass and maintaining a sense of muscle mass with age will become one of the greatest anti-aging secrets that people will eventually realize. And you can't get that with any pill. I mean, imagine this for a second. I've been around almost 56 years. We've still not come up with a single pill that can help you increase your muscle mass. It's basically a use it or lose it phenomenon. You have to stimulate muscle tissue to increase muscle mass. And you've got to do it for lower and upper body. And what they've seen in prostate cancer studies, including in men on ADT, is just as little as 3 exercises for lower body and 3 exercises for upper body, which can take about 20 to 25 minutes, can help with that and maintaining muscle mass. So you're doing lower body exercises, upper body, you can work with a trainer, you can pick your own, and you focus not only on the first half of the body, the front half, but also the back half. because it's the back half, the muscles in the back side of the body that you can't see normally unless you're like me and stare yourself at the mirror or within the mirror day in and day out, or like Peter. Peter does that too. Peter, our camera person, is just obsessed with his looks, and all he does is stare at himself in the mirror all day long. So imagine this. We have a generation of people focusing on everything that's happening forward into the mirror. No kidding. The bicep. Someone says, make a bicep. You go, hey, that's pretty good. What we don't realize is back here, the tricep, in terms of volume, in terms of space, in terms of muscle mass, is as large in certain measurements or larger, and potentially takes up as much space or tissue as the bicep, which means if all you're doing is this, but not working on the tricep back here, then you are losing out in terms of quantity and quality of muscle. The same thing is with the quadricep. So the quadricep, the leg muscle above the knee, behind that is a massive muscle group. Perhaps you heard of it from watching football, the hamstrings. So the hamstrings also take up a huge amount of mass. If you don't also work in, and again, this is for a different time because I want to save part of all these little tricks for a different class we're going to do for PCRI in the future. Plus, it just makes me seem a lot more important when I can hold on to certain amounts of information that people have to tune back in on in order to get. The back of the leg, the quads, being developed along, the quads are the front, but the hammies in the back being developed as much as the quads are allowed to give you the perfect amount of quantity and quality of muscle that can help maintain muscle mass, reduce your risk of all sorts of problems, not just from ADT, but in terms of getting older. And I'll show you some of those exercises in the next video that we do. Where was I? That was number 4, right, Peter? I think Peter's looking in the mirror right now. I'm waiting until he takes a break. Obsessed with it. Stretch. Actually, he says it. Stretch. Says, man, it sounds so easy, but stretching is so challenging. If you're not used to doing it, I love this Vic Lombardi guy. I mean, here I challenge him, and within minutes, he produces his own 5 tips that is probably more tips than most websites have ever given out there in terms of what to do after treatment from prostate cancer. Stretch. Man, it sounds so easy, but stretching is so challenging. I can read pretty well without my glasses. At least I think in my mind I can. But stretching is so challenging. If you're not used to doing it, first of all, it hurts. Secondly, if it's too easy, you're probably doing it wrong. Notice how I emphasize wrong when I put my head up against the screen. Wrong. These are the tricks I'm learning now with the pandemic. Learn proper stretching from a trainer if you have the means, or if you're not really bold, give yoga a try. Again, an aging phenomenon. Happens in ADT. Our bodies are mostly water. We lose that water with age. Whether you want to look at it as we become more dried out, I don't know, any way you want to look at it, things happen. We are not as flexible. I always find it interesting when people my age go out and they try something new, and a day or two later, they tear their Achilles. And people always say, you can go talk to the surgeons out there who fix Achilles. This is a huge epidemic problem of weekend warriors, people tearing their Achilles tendons, and it requires a lot of attention to come back from them. But what we don't hear enough of is, why do they keep tearing? They keep tearing in an environment where people are doing things and stretching and injuring and putting huge amounts of stress on that area, and it tears. Well, part of the reason it tears as you get older is it's not as pliable. The water, the amount of water in the tissue, the pliability, the flexibility actually becomes compromised. It becomes more tight. So without naming any names, I had a friend not too long ago who turned 60 and thought, well, this new sport out there, which is the equivalent of basically sort of hardcore aggressive exercise, without naming any names or naming the activity, a day within this activity, wham! That's what happens, and that's what we tend to see a lot of. It's very scary. It's a very scary injury, but it also tells you that it's essential Pliability is essential, learning to stretch. Now, there's always an exception to the rule. And I've heard them all in 33 years, just trust me. Someone says, well, I can't do this because I'm the exception. So what I tend to hear is, I am not able to do this kind of stretching for whatever reasons. I understand that. There are now plenty of businesses, plenty of places and videos around the world that shows you also what's called passive stretching, where someone can actually stretch you. And plenty of athletes do that. They go in, it's like with a trainer, and they actually get passively stretched. The actual trainer stretches the person, stretches legs, stretches arms, stretches the body, and people feel a lot better. So I don't know where you live, but there are plenty of these accredited or certified places all around the country. So those are the 5 lifestyle tips. Let's review. Numero uno. Sugar-free is where to be. The greater thought here is low carb is a good way to go, but find a middle ground. But really what this is saying is find a way to do a little bit of caloric restriction. I talked about in the conference last year about a very famous study done at Duke and several other places. It was called the Calorie Study. And just by reducing a couple hundred calories a day, a lot came from carbs, but just by reducing as you got older, a couple hundred calories a day, people just felt better. That's what they reported. They just reported feeling better. They're not overwhelming the system. And remember always, there's one good carb. There's others, but one major good carb, and that's fiber. And think of that as dietary fiber, not commercial sources of fiber. We weren't meant to take all these pills and powders unless we needed to. There's plenty of dietary fiber out there for you, whether it's nuts, seeds, fruits, vegetables, legumes, which is basically the lentils, beans category, plenty of natural sources of fiber that make your Moyad train run on time. Not too fast, not too slow. On time. That's what you want. Man, Peter, I'm on fire today. What do you think? Would you agree? Of course he agrees. He's got no choice. Number 2, actually read the labels. I tell you enough over and over again. I don't care if it's even a supplement label. This is a good thing. Here's a supplement box. Oh, I don't work for any of these companies here that I'm showing you. It's important to know what that label is saying. What are these compounds? Look them up. This is going into your body. And this is not a huge amount of time that needs to be invested. Very little time into figuring out, what is actually going in there. Number 3, put the work in your workouts, which means you got to break a sweat. Part of the reason that exercise has activity to make most drugs work better with exercise, the actual exercise makes the drug more efficient, is that the reason it has activity or research in the area of reducing stress, and think about right now what I'm talking about during the pandemic, plus people dealing with cancer, reducing stress, reducing anxiety, reducing depression, and reducing something that we don't talk about enough here at the PCRI or any other place that I'm out there talking or doing education, catastrophizing. Catastrophizing, go look it up, is a very toxic, real thing. It's negative, intrusive thoughts that just keep coming in and you can't break that cycle. We know there are many treatments for that. One of them is regular exercise or breaking a sweat. Lean and mean, cardio is essential, but so is strength training. You need to think of aerobic activity with resistance activity. And it doesn't have to be always lifting weights. The body itself can be its own resistance. In other words, you can do yoga, Pilates. These are all fabulous things. So combining aerobic and resistance together is the perfect marriage. When you remove one of them, you're really removing an essential partner in that marriage, and you're basically all by yourself. And you don't, like, if my wife left me, or suddenly she disappeared, I would be a complete hot mess. I would need huge amounts of all types of assistance and therapy. But hopefully she doesn't see this video, then she could use that against me. You need both. All right. I said that was 4 and 5 is stretch. Remember, you can have someone passively stretch you, or you can learn to stretch yourself. Some people that have terrible leg cramps at night, another big problem as we get older, They realized that with stretching right before they go to bed, very simple stretches, those leg cramps can disappear. A lot of people instead turn to all these elixirs for helping with leg cramps. And there's a million out there, and people go, oh, these work great. And other people say these are horrible. But one thing that consistently works is allowing a little bit of stretching before you go to bed so that area doesn't tighten up and that cramp happens. So I got through those. What else do I need to get through, Peter? I'm kind of tired. How many minutes did I go? Okay, my contract says that the $1 million you're paying me, I'm only supposed to go about 30 minutes. So I'm already at my $1 million mark. Is my Learjet, by the way, gassed up and ready to go when I'm done? Yes, it is. Okay. Let's now read the Men's Health Checklist, which I'm going to help contribute to. I didn't necessarily help contribute to this. I give it a B, B+. It's pretty good. And I'm going to comment on these. You can find these on the PCRI website at pcri.org, right? Isn't it org? PCRI.org. You can find the Men's Health Checklist. And by the way, happy Father's Day to all you fathers out there. And as you know, I'm with you in terms of we should have a support group for everything that we've dealt with. And I'm talking about kids. I'm talking about dealing with kids and dealing with like young kids. And sometimes they can be very difficult. And so we do need that support. So, but happy Father's Day. And part of the reason we're doing this today and walking through all these steps is when you look at life expectancy or most of the major chronic diseases, men, now you're seeing life expectancies drop significantly compared to women. Women's health, of course, is important. The men's health is really in desperate need of a tune-up. It really is. So this men's health checklist will just walk you through some basic blood tests that are important. And it talks about PSA, and it talks about CBC, complete blood count, where it looks at your different counts. It talks about what's called a metabolic panel. You can take a look at these online. And a metabolic panel is not just, it says here kidney function. Remember, this is also a part of a panel that looks at your blood sugars. And your blood sugars are critical today, obviously. One is called blood glucose or fasting blood glucose. And the other one is called hemoglobin A1c. That's more of a long-term measure of blood sugar. A fasting blood sugar kind of tells you what's happening in the moment during the day. Hemoglobin A1c, which mostly used to just be given to diabetics, and now is a standard part of what a lot of primary care doctors do for anyone that walks in the office, gives you more of a 3-month assessment of how your average blood sugars are doing. And then it talks about a hormone panel, and that covers blood tests. I mean, just some of the basic blood tests and learning about those blood tests. My dream scenario is patients need to come in and they need to know exactly the blood tests that they're going to be getting, and they need to know the interpretation of those blood tests. For example, they need to understand that the vitamin D blood test is okay, but there's a problem with how validated it is. There's a problem with what a normal range is. We actually don't have a good idea what normal range is. If you go look, I can tell you right now, you can go look at most labs, it will say 30 to 100. That is a massive range, which basically means we don't know what the HE double toothpicks is in terms of a real normal range. So we're just going to make this range massive. Let me give you an analogy. Imagine if someone said to you, let's see, we're not sure what a normal level of cholesterol is, so we're just going to say a cholesterol level from 100 to 500 is normal. You go, what the HE double toothpicks is going on here? The truth of the matter is that we don't have enough research to say what an ideal vitamin D is. We don't even know if that's going to be accepted as a generalized screening test in the future, but you have to learn these pros and cons, and we will cover these in future issues. Again, drawing you out, teasing you out to show up to another video that we do, because again, I'm that self-conscious about when I get on camera. Screening for heart disease and lung cancer, there's a little bit of talk in the men's health checklist about what's called a coronary calcium score. Coronary calcium score is really interesting, and you can talk to multiple doctors about the pros and cons of that. There's a lot of focus on using that test for where a lot of people fit. So remember, when men and women fit on disease risk, and you look at risk of certain diseases, there is high risk, and then there's low risk. What we don't talk enough about is this huge ocean in the middle called intermediate risk. Remember, I'm coming closer to the camera to give you the emphasis. Intermediate risk. Intermediate risk is, what do you do? Do you take a medication? Do you act more like it could become severe or high, or do you act more in the low range? We don't know what to do. It's kind of like the gray area, right? It's like, what do I do with this? Where do I go with this? Kind of like Netflix. You watch Netflix and then you see a bunch of programs. You're like, do I really want to watch this? This seems kind of stupid, but I don't know. Maybe I'll get something out of it. And you just can't make up your mind. Anyway, I digress. Intermediate risk. Where coronary calcium scoring has become very interesting for cardiologists and primary care, is if you talk to them, is that in those gray area people where you can't make a decision to make certain medication and other decisions, it's a helpful tool to tell you whether or not you lean more toward high or you lean more toward low. If I had a dime for everyone that came up to me at a conference and asked me this question, I would have so many dimes that it would fill my room. And that is, my doctor told me I'm in this gray area of cardiac risk. I don't know what to do. I don't know if I should take this pill. I don't know if I should be more aggressive on lifestyle, both. So I'm intermediate risk. So you could talk to your doctor about a coronary calcium scoring test, which is like a CT quick picture of your arteries to tell you how much calcium is basically on the outsides of those vessels, and they add those up. And it's helpful if you need it. If you don't need the test, there's enough radiation exposure there, like any test that has radiation, that you got to be careful not to just automatically volunteer for it. You've got to look at the pros and cons. I know people like to treat radiation tests like it's no big deal. It is a big deal. Being exposed to a lot of radiation or a little bit of radiation over and over again is not necessary in some cases, but you got to find out if that's necessary for you. Screening for colon cancer, going back to this men's health checklist. Notice how it's not a Moyad men's health checklist, because I'm going to help PCRI get this a little bit better so that they will get a Moyad A+, instead of, what did I give them, a B, B+? I'm looking at Peter. I gave between B and B+. Let's just give it a B, because that makes me feel more important, like I have to really improve this thing. It talks about screening for colon cancer and called Cologuard. Basically where you can send off a sample. It's more than just a sample, actually, and they test for any sort of changes, including blood in the stool. And for average risk, if you see the commercial on TV, there's that walking box at the hands, they're trying to get you all excited about their test. Let's make some money. That's great. But the truth of the matter is, they are right. It's an average. It's for people with average risk. And it's a great option. But we don't know if you do it multiple times what happens, because most of the data that got it approved out there for use was based on a one-time use and then seeing what happens. People ask all the time, does it detect polyps? No. It detects precancerous changes or cancer that's actually there potentially. It doesn't do what a colonoscopy does, but at the same time, it's better than nothing. And you're going to see more of these tests that surround colonoscopy in the future that have more and more data that are options for people that either don't want a colonoscopy or they're at an age where the cons of colonoscopy become greater than the pros. Because as you get older, the potential risk of colonoscopy, the sedation, the procedure itself becomes more of a discussion. And having more of these options like Cologuard is a darn good thing. Screening for skin cancer is also on the men's checklist. The only advice I can provide for that, you're talking about super high risk melanoma patient. That's yours truly. In fact, if you ever go Google one of my first videos from my backyard, which was 10 or 15 years ago, it was on skin cancer. It was on sunscreen. I'm a big fan of talking about sunscreen, and we'll talk about it in a future session, what to look for. I tend to look for the cheapest base sunscreens that are the most environmentally friendly, like the zinc oxides. I want something that is basically sitting on top of my skin. I'm not going to absorb it in huge amounts, and it's not going to go damage the coral reefs. And I need something comprehensively, and the most comprehensive research on sunscreen, some of the most comprehensive are actually some of the cheapest. They're not some of the most expensive. And when I'm also protecting the coral reefs out there, I'm making millennials like Peter, who's hitting here recording this, they smile and they realize I'm doing everything right. But I've learned this from millennials and millennial kids out there that we have, that it is the right thing to do to think more holistically and globally. And so being very careful to identify the pros and cons of sunscreens is critical. My favorite, zinc oxide, titanium dioxide, some of the cheapest ones that go on very clear. The one that I have here, again, don't work for any of these companies, was Badger. Badger's one of my favorites, and it's a clear zinc oxide, so it's not one of those things that you put on your nose and there's this big caking effect. There's lots of good companies out there. One of the last few items let me just cover in the men's health checklist is detecting osteoporosis, or as I would say, detecting bone loss or significant bone loss. One thing that's not talked about, there's many different ways to do that. And I understand in oncology that the two that are talked about here are DEXA and QCT. But I also want to tell you about DEXA for a second, because it's about 10 to 20% of the radiation of a chest x-ray. So very low radiation tells you a lot. Everything that DEXA does, if you go to a center to get an osteoporosis screen, always ask the people working there, do you have the software to also look at my lean muscle mass? So what a lot of people don't realize about DEXA, like some of these imaging tests, is they're used in clinical trials to see everything from bodybuilding, how you're doing in terms of workouts, to how you're doing in terms of weight loss. Are you losing mostly fat tissue and keeping your lean muscle mass, or are you losing mostly lean muscle tissue? And every once in a while, I think it's interesting that if you go to a center, they have the same software, that with that same amount that you pay, which is generally very little for a DEXA osteoporosis test, you can also have your body fat or your lean muscle mass estimated around your body, which I think is very interesting. And in a couple of years, or your follow-up test, they do a comparative. So that's fascinating. The other types of osteoporosis scans, we would need probably a couple hours here to go through the pros and cons. But obviously, this is becoming an issue for men too. In prostate cancer, when men lose their testosterone temporarily or permanently because of treatment, obviously it affects the bones, not only in terms of quantity, but quality. So talking osteoporosis, if you're going to be on androgen deprivation in terms of prevention and how to screen for it with your doctor who knows you a heck of a lot better than I do, is really smart. Then vaccines. Boy, is this such an amazing topic, because I just wrote a paper that got published in Current Urology Reports. I think it's accessible. I talk about the importance of adult vaccinations, not in terms of the obvious, but in terms of the not so obvious. So the obvious is I got a shingles vaccine. It's going to help me prevent shingles. And we'll talk about that to finish off this portion of the segment. And the shingles vaccine is a great vaccine. But what people don't talk about enough with the flu shot and the vaccine is they just kind of argue back and forth, is it really effective or not? What we know it does is, in most of these cases, not only does it reduce risk, but it reduces the severity of the issue if you get it. So even if you get it, it's not as severe. And the reason this is a very relevant discussion right now is with some of these more severe infections or severe forms of shingles, you get a massive inflammatory response, and it's chronic. It can go 6 months to 12 months. And with that chronic inflammatory response, you see exactly what we're seeing now, where we're nervous about, for example, COVID becoming a cardiovascular disease as much as an infectious disease. In other words, all that body inflammation creates a situation where you can increase the risk of a blood clot or a cardiovascular event. So if I was running the commercials for TV on adult vaccinations and getting more adults to get their adult vaccinations, for example, I would highlight as much the ancillary benefits or the side benefits as much as the obvious benefit. And I would quit arguing about, oh, does this give you 70% protection or 80% protection? But Shingrix, which is the new shingles vaccine, which is a non-live vaccine, it's a recombinant vaccine, which is important, because there's concern of some vulnerable populations not being able to accept a attenuated live vaccine. But again, this new shingles vaccine is open to most individuals. There was a new paper this year showing many cancer patients are at a heightened risk for shingles, whether it's because of immune suppressive therapy, a lot of different theories. In the future, for children, for my kids, for everybody else, you will see, in my opinion, more vaccines like this that are this potent, this active. The fact that it has 90 to 95% efficacy, regardless of the age, you qualify when you're 50 and above. It's 2 shots, not 1, separated by at least 2 to 6 months. And those shots can hurt. And that has not gone appropriately in the commercials, whether they're in magazines or on TV. It can hurt. And not just the clinical trials, they see anywhere from, I believe it was a quarter to a third of people had a real owie. It hurt for several days. But if you talk to anyone who's had them, you'll see it 1 out of 3, 1 out of 4. Doctors will call me all the time and say, this really did hurt. Other people say it didn't hurt at all. Part of the reason for the real strong hurt is it has a natural adjuvant in there. What do I mean by a natural? It's a booster. It's such a potent booster to boost immunologic activity, to give it its bang. It actually comes from a tree in South America called the soapbark tree. And so they took this compound, they put it in with this vaccine, and they're going to license this compound. It came from a natural source, and it basically causes a major immune boost. And so part of the reason for that issue is you get that major immune booster reaction. And so it can amplify those, what they call flu-like effects the first few days, and pain. That can subside. It subsides in most people in a couple days, but you should talk about that with your own physician. But there are reasons why this shingles vaccine is second to nothing in terms of potency. And there is a sort of a no pain, no gain here with it for some people. But if the first one was almost intolerable or difficult, then talk about when to possibly delay or get a second one. But a lot of people, remember, that's a minority, but it's still a strong minority. A lot of people, though, do just fine with it. This one says eyes to finish off the men's health checklist. Oh man, they do this on me on purpose. They're out to get me. It says a yearly visit with the eye doctor is important, even if you do not wear glasses or contacts, because glaucoma can develop silently. We call glaucoma high blood pressure of the eyes. And again, the reason I always say, and I'm going to leave you with this, is that glaucoma, we have to add on here age-related macular degeneration. Very common with aging, can actually cause blindness. No one ever wants to talk about one of the primary therapies for it, if you have moderate to advanced stages, is actually a dietary supplement. Everybody wants to put dietary supplements in an all good or all bad category. It's almost like politics. This is either all good or all bad, can't be in between. Dietary supplements either work for everything or they don't work at all. No. Macular degeneration, age-related macular degeneration. If you haven't seen the commercials, PreserVision is all over TV from Bausch and Lomb. And the reason they almost make a disease claim like a drug commercial is because they have that research, and ophthalmologists everywhere in the world use a product like theirs as a therapy for certain types of age-related macular degeneration patients. In fact, if you want to really see an endorsement for a supplement, go to the National Eye Institute. That's a division of the NIH. You basically pay for all of that with your tax money. They tell you that a supplement is primary therapy. Man, I digressed there. But the importance of the bigger picture here is what I'm going to put in here. By the way, I'm not sad today. I'm happy today. This is my deference to millennials, many of which, including Peter and my son, can only communicate by text. You communicate vocally, they don't know what you're doing anymore. So I'm communicating by text and saying I'm in a good mood. Heart healthy equals prostate healthy. Heart healthy equals prostate healthy. Another way to put it out there is that when you improve your heart health, you normalize your cholesterol, you normalize your blood pressure, you normalize your blood sugar, you try to maintain an adequate weight or waist, you exercise, you do all the Moya things we tell you to do. It's not only prostate healthy, and yes, it's healthy for you if they took out your prostate. So it's prostate healthy, and if they took out the prostate, it's healthy for your whole body from head to toe. We find that it's reducing your risk of a lot of different chronic diseases or delaying the diagnosis of them because you get them later in life. So for example, we know being heart healthy reduces your risk of heart disease as well as cardiovascular disease as a whole, including strokes. We know it also potentially reduces your risk of colon cancer. We know it's skin healthy. We know it's healthy for your bones. and we know it's healthy for your eyes. Some of the lowest rates or lower rates of chronic eye disease appear in people who tend to be heart healthier. So I'm going to leave you with a little bit of a tip. You've heard the term blue zones and people living to be 100 on average, and you should go to these places like Andorra or Sardinia, or go to this place in Japan, Okinawa. But there's a little secret we're not telling you, or we're not telling men when we talk about the longest lived populations in the world, including in a certain area, Loma Linda, California. What we're not telling you is these populations of people aren't just amazing because they live to be 100. They live to be 100 in good health in general. But how do they do that? Well, if you look at their profiles, they have some of the heart healthiest profiles of any population in the world. So then it pays off for all the other body systems from head to toe. So they have lower rates of dying from a variety of diseases, not just heart disease, not just stroke at an early age, but multiple types of cancer, for example, dementia. You go through a lot of different, so it's not, they're living longer and better because they're reducing as a population overall what we call morbidity and mortality. So another way of saying heart healthy is all healthy, or heart healthy is prostate healthy, is heart healthy helps you live longer and better. That's one of the main factors associated with all those long-lived populations. They have very, very low rates of heart disease, having been in many of these places myself and know the research, which is why I'm also selfish and I try to follow these things that I tell people to follow. Okay, with that in mind, I believe that we have gone about an hour. Is that correct? Have we gone? We're looking at the actual amount of time. 51. 51? Wow, that's way too much time. I can't wait to get my $1 million honorarium. So let me repeat again. We're going to put online Vic Lombardi, not Vince Lombardi. We talked about in the interview how Vince Lombardi died in his 50s of colon cancer. He had a very aggressive type of colon cancer. And it was a tragedy. I don't know if early screening in his case would have made a difference because he had a very aggressive form. But to me, he was also an advocate of taking care of himself because he did quit smoking. He quit smoking apparently because his mom told him to quit smoking because he wasn't being a good role model. But he was an amazing coach for a lot of people, and also quit smoking and happened to have this horrible disease. But we talked about the similarities and differences between him and Vic Lombardi, the person I interviewed. And we went through that interview and we talked about his favorite movies, and then we talked about his lifestyle recommendations. And then we talked about, just take a look at this men's health checklist. We'll comment more on it in the future. And finally, I do, again, want to mention the problem I had with Mr. Lombardi. The problem I had with Mr. Lombardi is he clearly didn't understand the better university out there that he probably should have either attended or should have been hanging out at. So I hope to see you soon in the fall conference. I hope you gained something today in terms of not only an advertisement, but in terms of knowledge and anything else that we're going to work on in the future. Please feel free to send us a note besides your donation and tell us topics that you want to cover, because we're going to cover more specific topics in the future. I know I have to tie this too. And including, updates on COVID, including eye disease, including other things that affect men's health, but also women's health. And anyway, I think that's it, Peter. I think I'm ready to sign off. I think we might be bringing Alex back in. You all have an incredible Father's Day. You deserve it. Hopefully your kids, I don't know. In my world, kids should be basically taking care of their parents. And I'm not just talking about foot massage. I'm talking about financially. I'm talking about whatever you need financially. Kids should take care of it. You've suffered enough. I love y'all. Can't wait to talk to you again. Peter, and the camera back there, thanks you. I love you too. Dr. Scholes, I know you didn't show up this time. I'm going to hold this against you that you made me go solo for this long. Alex, I'm going to also hold it against you that you made me go solo this long. But you two are beautiful, wonderful people also. And I'll see you next time. Talk to you soon, as Carol Burnett would say. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Dr. Moyad. We really appreciate it. Well, that concludes our Men's Health webinar, and thanks to everyone who donated and to all of you who watched. As a reminder, you can go ahead and subscribe to our channel and be notified when we release new videos on prostate cancer and men's health. Remember to see the links in the description if you want to donate to PCRI or if you want to sign up to our conference in September. We're not sure if we're going to be able to have an in-person audience yet because of COVID-19, but we will absolutely be going virtual. So if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, you can go ahead and see it there. We do hope to see you in person, but if not, the virtual side will be great. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope to see you all very soon. And I also hope you all have a happy Father's Day. Bye, everyone.